The NBA season is officially back as we got our first look at the 2024 76ers, taking a peek at how each of the new pieces make their first impressions as the Sixers faced off against the New Zealand Breakers. Now, Joel Embiid nor Paul George stepped on the floor, but we did get a look at Guerschon Yabusele, who was the biggest player to make an impression in the opening game. I want to talk about some of my takeaways from this particular preseason game. Not a ton to break down as it was the New Zealand Breakers and the Sixers rightfully blew them out. But for me, Guerschon Yabusele is absolutely the story here. This is a guy who is clearly extremely hungry for his second NBA chance, who was coming off an Olympic run in which he was one of the heroes for France, and ultimately may just straight up be a better basketball player than a lot of us have given him credit for. This could be an absolute feather in Daryl Morey's cap, as he's a player with the potential to outperform his minimum contract by a massive margin. He did it last year with Kelly Oubre late in the offseason. He may have done it again with Guerschon Yabusele this year. Now, to dive into exactly what he produced on the floor this year, he had 15 points, did not miss a shot, and to dive a little deeper into this, he also added 2 assists, had a steal, 6 of 6 from the field, 1 of 1 from 3, was a plus 17. Again, we're not going to get too deep into that, as it was some inferior competition that the Sixers should have no problem stopping, but I do have a couple takeaways with Guerschon here. For starters, my first impression is he did come in as the backup center role. That is something that stood out to me. I think in an ideal world, in the long run, we see him slide into more of a power forward-like situation, but he still shined in this opportunity. I wasn't asked to do just center things. He made a couple decisions off the short roll where he was a playmaker with the ball in his hands. That was something that I was really impressed by. I did not fully expect. The athleticism, I thought, popped a little bit. He looked big out there, which I think is a really good takeaway there. He's got NBA size, and to be perfectly honest, I'm really grateful. I'm glad that I did go back and watch some of his Celtics tape from the first time that he was in the NBA. He's a night and day different player than that time, man. He moves more fluidly as an athlete. He's more of a perimeter-oriented player at this point, that he was more of a traditional big man at that point in time. And I think that he's going to play a real deal role in this Sixers team. Now, to take a peek at the depth chart as is currently constructed, again, obviously a ton of moving parts here, as we have not even seen Paul George suit up in a Sixers uniform, and that's obviously going to be a key part of this team. As we know what he brings to the floor from a 22.6 point per game standpoint just last year, 5.2 rebounds, 3.5 assists. The shooting is going to be a real factor on this Sixers team. 41.3% from beyond the arc overall last year, 45.7% from the corner here. Paul George is going to be an important part of this Sixers team. But when breaking down the depth chart, I do think Yabusele has a chance at climbing, maybe even into this starting lineup. That the biggest concern that people have hammered home about the Sixers team is who is going to rebound the basketball. That yes, Joel Embiid is great at a lot of things, but rebounding not at the top of that list. He ends up pulling in a ton of them because he is a big body, real deal 7-foot dude who plays around the basket a ton, but he does not have that rebounding skill. Now I'm not going to go as far as to say that I think Yabusele absolutely does, but what he is a guy with real deal size, real deal athleticism, and he does have a fire, a hunger in him that I'm very impressed by. So as things are currently slated, the depth chart looking like Yabusele sitting at that backup power forward spot. Again, it is interesting to me that he did come in that backup center situation. It also felt like the Sixers more so in tonight's game, and I know it's preseason day one. We're not going to do too many hard-hitting takeaways on this, but it felt like they were running and gunning in a way that was not the case. I'll also mention Andre Drummond getting the start as center as Joel Embiid was held out. Looked exactly how you remember him. Really solid, really high level, grabbed every single defensive rebound, it felt like. He also knocked down a corner 3 tonight, and that has been some of the buzz around training camp, is Andre looking to extend his range, do whatever the team needs him to do. He looked real comfortable shooting it, attempted a couple, knocked down his first one. And I do think that's something to watch. And if you really want to harp on the rebounding issues, then you can start talking me into flexibility of can Andre Drummond and Joel Embiid share the floor. Now, I'm not going to put the wagon before the horse here, as there's still a lot of time for this ultimately to come together. But Andre, it's nice to have you back in Philadelphia. It's nice to have a true innings eater big man for the games in which Joel Embiid cannot play. And I do think that he's going to be a vital piece of this team when factoring in making sure you're in the correct path to getting this team healthy for the playoffs. Now, looking beyond this, there are some takeaways here. There's a couple other players that did shine. And I'm going to pull up the full box score here. Again, it is the New Zealand Breakers, so we do have to temper that into our expectations here. The Sixers ultimately pulling up a 139-84 victory here. But another guy that stood out to me, it was the rookie Jared McCain, that in the matchup, him knocking down 4 3-pointers in the game here, including a no-dip 3-pointer. I was really impressed with that. He looks like a real deal high-level elite shooter, man. And it's going to be interesting how he fully factors into this team. I don't think there's a clear role for him off the get-go, but he's getting glowing reports coming out of training camp, and I do think that if he can kind of nail down that reputation as that high-level elite shooter, which, by the way, he has shown to be at every stop thus far in high school, in college, in Duke, shooting over 40% from beyond the arc there, including hitting 8 3-pointers in an NCAA tournament game. The dude is that caliber of shooter there, but if you can establish that role on the Sixers team, we might be speaking about him a little differently, and that factors in that there's more to his game than just that. I thought he did some nice things off dribble penetration there. He's a guy that's another dude that can straight up play basketball. And it does feel like that's something that the Sixers have really leaned into more with this particular roster. That too often I felt like so much was skill set decided. That you had a guy who was a shooter, you had a guy who was a rebounder, you had a guy who was a defender. You know what Matisse Thybulle was going to do when he's on the floor. Now it's a lot of guys that can do a lot of things. That Kelly Oubre, there might not be a singular skill that he's elite at, but he's a good basketball player that can do a lot of things. And that brings versatility, that brings athleticism, that brings optionality in what he can do on this floor. And I think Guerschon Yabusele is absolutely a fit of every part of this list. That he is versatile, he is athletic, and I'm pretty excited about how the jump shot looks. And this could be a guy who we're talking about as a potential come in and score a couple points off the bench. Be a guy who can change a game, put your imprints all over it. He really shines me in preseason day one. That would be my number one takeaway from what I saw from this team. I thought him and McCain were the two that exceeded my expectations by the biggest margin. There were some other guys that just look solid. Drummond, exactly what I expect him to be. Tyrese Maxey hitting step back threes, being the version of himself that we know him to be. I do still expect another leap from Tyrese Maxey this year. We know how good he was last year, and to pull up exactly what Maxey brought to the table last year, 25.9 points per game, 6.2 assists, a huge leap there, 61% on corner threes, which is absolutely absurd. It wouldn't shock me if they're trying to make sure they get some more looks at him in those type of situations this year. And there also was a lot more movement in the offense in general. They're running Maxey off screens, have him flying around the court. I'm excited by all these pieces, all this potential, and let's not forget the guy at the helm for calling the shots here. Nick Nurse is a proven championship coach. He's won at every single level that he's coached at, from over in England to the G League to the NBA in his first season with the Toronto Raptors, and he's got a team that looks like it has the horses. Still, plenty of time to figure out what we have before the season. But I guess when factoring your expectations, I think Guerschon Yabusele should become a much more household name than is currently the case. This is a guy that, at the minimum, I think is going to be an everyday rotation player, a guy playing on just about an every game basis, maybe a couple matchups where Nurse doesn't quite see it. But I think there's a real chance that this dude is pushing for that starter role, that we're maybe having a conversation of, is it best for the team if we're dropping Kelly Oubre to more of a six-man type role, and then the starters looking like Joel Embiid, Guerschon Yabusele, Paul George, Caleb Martin, and Tyrese Maxey. Gives you a little more size, a little more versatility, athleticism, and I would say way more defensive-oriented, although Kelly's been very good on that side of the floor since coming to Philadelphia as well. But it's nice. These are good problems to have. That's not even mentioning a guy like Eric Gordon, who you saw the expanded range. You see the appeal of why he's on this Sixers team. That's something I'm very much in favor with, and something that, by the way, Jared McCain has spoken a ton about in training camp, is he's trying to expand his range, that it is important when you have a team built around a Joel Embiid, who, again, we know what he is from a talent perspective, what this guy brings to the team, but when you have a team constructed around a big man, spacing is constantly going to be the name of the game. So when you have players that can shoot from 3 or 4 feet back from beyond the arc, that's 3 or 4 feet more that a defense has to respect that guy, and opens up the floor entirety here. The bottom line to me, the number one takeaway, obviously there's going to be stiffer competition than the New Zealand Breakers. But I do think when you look and you squint at this roster, every box that you're hoping is checked off seems to be. That there's a lot of different ways this team can play. There's a lot of different ways this team can win. And I think Nick Nurse has his work cut out for him for how he can construct things from here. So ultimately, a couple more preseason games. We're down to, I believe it's 15 days is the official count until the NBA season tips off. I'm going to be here from start to finish right here on Sixers Digest. This is the most excited I've been about a Sixers team really throughout the entirety of the Joel Embiid era, particularly that they have this entire season to learn, grow together, build up chemistry. This is not like the 2018-19 season, which I think is, I guess, glorified in a way a little bit more than it probably should be. Jimmy Butler obviously being traded mid-year, Tobias Harris being traded mid-year. There's a full season where this team can go to war together, and I would just argue pound for pound that this is a more talented team than that. So this is very clearly to me Joel Embiid's best chance at a championship. This is very clear to me a Sixers team that means business this year in the East. Boston is still the gold standard, but the Sixers should be considered next. And I cannot wait to see how things go throughout the entirety of the season. And we're off to a great start in preseason day one. So I want as many of you guys tuning in this, hanging me as possible from start to finish this year. Appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning in this video here. Make sure you smash that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video, any comments you have below. I want to hear how excited you are about Guerschon Yabusele. Are you on the same level as me, or am I getting a little bit too ahead of myself? I love this dude. Cannot wait to see how things play out from here, and cannot wait to talk with you guys next time. So make sure you're smashing that subscribe button, and speak with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.